So we're looking for the return on equity on a levered firm. Remember that for an unlevered firm, i.e. one that's all equity and a completely equity firm, no debt, the return on equity equals the return on assets. But when a firm levers itself by adding debt to its capital structure, return on equity becomes this equation. The return on equity is equal to the return on assets of the unlevered firm plus the leverage effect that debt creates plus the tax shelter effect that debt creates. So the ROA, the return on assets for an unlevered firm, is given as 14%. The leverage effect is the effect that taking on more debt has on the riskiness of the firm. It's given by the following equation. The leverage effect is equal to the return on assets minus the required rate of return on debt times the debt to equity ratio. So it's basically how much more risky your company is now that you have debt, now that you owe people money. Well, we have the return on assets is 14%. Our required rate of return on debt is 9%. Our debt, the percentage of our capital structure that's debt is 25%, so we plug in 0.25 for D, and we plug in 0.75 for E because the percentage of our capital structure as equity is given as 75%. When we crunch that out, we get a leverage effect of 0.0167 or 1.67%. Finally, the tax shelter effect is the tax savings that debt financing creates. The equation is the rate of return on debt minus the after-tax rate of return on debt times the debt to equity ratio. So it's that tax savings multiplied by your debt to equity ratio. Well, we know the rate of return on debt is 9%, and the after-tax rate of return on debt is just the 9% rate of return on debt times 1 minus the tax rate. So times 1 minus 40%, minus 0.4, because we're given that the tax rate is 40%. Again, we multiply that whole term by the debt to equity ratio, 0.25 over 0.75, and we get the tax shelter effect of 0.012, 1.2%. So the return on equity of the levered firm is, again, the return on assets of the unlevered firm plus the leverage effect plus the tax shelter effect. So it's 14% plus 1.67% plus 1.2% or 16.87%.